What if I suggested, Wayne, that a lot of self-harm is rooted in lies they believe about themselves, and we might know they believe the lies and we don't confidently step into that space? If you have a child who thinks he's stupid and you know he's not, you have to go in and rescue him from that belief.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, there's a new term that's gaining traction called digital self-harm. It's an emerging trend where individuals really anonymously post or share hurtful content about themselves online. This behavior can be mistaken for mistreatment by others, and yet the perpetrator and the victim are really the same person. It was first really identified in 2010. Digital self-harm hasn't really received the same amount of, I would say, kind of scholarly scrutiny as other self-directed abuse has among adults and other youth, really. To address this growing issue, though, there is a group that is doing some research out of the Florida Atlantic University and actually the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. They've analyzed 3 independent national surveys. One's from 2016, 2019, and 2021. And these surveys are of teens ages 13 to 17, where they really assess the prevalence of what they call digital self-harm. They explored 2 measures of digital self-harm. If teens had anonymously posted something mean about themselves online in their lifetime, and if they had anonymously cyberbullied themselves online in their lifetime. Results of the study published in the Journal of School Violence revealed that a meaningful proportion of U.S. youth have been involved in digital self-harm. Between 2019 and 2021, approximately 9 to 12% of 13 to 17-year-olds in the U.S. engaged in some form of digital self-harm. It's a more than an 88% increase from 2016. This upward trajectory, particularly among specific demographic groups, highlights the need really for a lot of targeted interventions. That's what they're finding. That's what these colleges are really kind of encouraging. They think that there needs to be more support systems, especially given that the research shows a strong association between digital self-harm and traditional self-harm, as well as digital self-harm and oftentimes suicidality. Dr. Kathy, I wanted to ask you, what do you think is important for us to know about self-harm and kids kind of in general?
Boy, I'm glad we're talking about this. I had no idea that this was going on. It's just frightening and so sad. Self-harm starts with belief systems. Again, could talk about this every day. What do children believe about themselves, about others, and about how the world is supposed to work? Do they drink the Kool-Aid and they think that they should be happy all the time? Do they think that, maybe they love God and they think that God's always going to give them everything they want? And when they don't have what they want, they blame God, they blame themselves, and then they self-harm. So I think for parents and educators who are listening, who have children in any way, shape, or form participating in self-harm, you don't just concentrate on what are they doing. You're asking yourself, why are they doing it? Why do they need to hurt themselves? Do they understand their emotions? Many of our boys don't have emotional vocabulary. That's something we've talked about here. And when you name it, you get it out of the dark. There's power there. You have something to talk about now. I think, what if I suggested, Wayne, that a lot of self-harm is rooted in lies they believe about themselves, and we might know they believe the lies and we don't confidently step into that space? If you have a child who thinks he's stupid and you know he's not, you have to go in and rescue him from that belief. If you think that you have a child who's desperate for popularity, security is I'm popular, identity is I'm popular, belonging is I'm popular, and your child doesn't feel popular, teach him some friendship skills. Teach him what he's doing that's making him not popular, because he's working too hard to be popular. So he comes across as prideful and people walk away. When we see our children behaving in ways that are going to distance themselves from people, which is going to cause them to not like themselves, which could then result in self-harm of any way, shape, or form, we have to step into that as parents, grandparents, teachers, counselors, pastors. It is not easy, but it's essential that we have the guts to say, Jonathan, let me tell you a few things I've noticed about you. And you don't ever talk about it unless you have solutions ready. You keep your mouth shut. When you see your children doing something that's causing them to hate themselves because of something that's going on in their beliefs, you don't point it out until you say, Let's try this instead. And then you're ready to model for them. You're ready to love them into progress. You're ready to pray with them. Let them hear you pray for them. That's what's got to be stated, is that self-harm starts with beliefs. Many of them are lies, and we know the lies. We often know the lies, and we have to care enough to step into that space.
Yeah, Dr. Kathy, I think that's really helpful. And I often imagine that some of these emotions or things that we would kind of like attribute to people driving towards self-harm, or really maybe like I don't know, like behavior muscles that they've really developed or grown with over time. I remember watching Inside Out with my kids, and there's a new Inside Out movie too, where they talk about the different emotions that you have: sadness and anger and joy and all of these different emotions. And sometimes I wonder if we don't give our kids really the opportunity to know what these different emotions are for. And so they kind of build, I would say, maybe different ways to handle that, different muscles to exercise with those different emotions, so to speak. I wanted to ask you, how should we talk to our kids about, different, we would say maybe negative feelings of like sadness or despondency or what have you, right? These are feelings that we all experience in our everyday life. Most of us have built muscles of what to do with those feelings when we have them. We might listen to a song, or we might write a letter, or we might do different things with them. I think sometimes when kids don't have an understanding of what they should do with an emotion, it's natural to let that emotion then build muscles for them to do something different. And they don't exercise doing something helpful with that feeling that could drive them into something different. How should we talk to our kids today about negative feelings or negative emotions?
Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about it too. I sometimes call them hard emotions. Grief, fear, shame, disappointment, regret, resentment, bitterness, things that happen. And I think one of the most important things to teach our children is to not stuff them. People who are familiar with the technology lies that we teach here at Celebrate Kids, the second technology lie that we believe tech has taught our young people is that they can be happy all the time. And that's because technology keeps us happy. We can win the games. We only answer the phone if we're in the right mood. We have access to all the music we want. Unlike when I was young and I had to have $18 to go to the store to buy the album for the one song. So our kids are, we would say, spoiled. They think that they can be happy all the time. And so as a result of that, any feeling other than that is really a scary, makes them mad kind of a thing. And so they can't stuff them. We have to give them the space and the way to process their grief and fear and shame and disappointment and frustration and the fact that they were caught with sin or whatever it might be. So do we model that for them? Do we talk with them about that? And, we can use movies and we can use characters in books. Sometimes it's easier for boys in particular to talk about how a character in a show responded to some situation than it is for him to admit the way that he would have responded to the same situation. And then after you talk about the character in the show, then you can come back and talk, well, Kevin, in your life, how has that shown up? And that can be a helpful way to do it with kids. But I think to not let them stuff the feelings is huge. To talk about them with real language is huge. For us to model, men in particular, Wayne, the research is real clear on this, that mad is a feeling that is safe for men. And I have the utmost respect for men who model for their sons and daughters and before their wives, more of their heart. For a man to show sadness because of a friend who is hurting because of an ill child. When your kids see that you're sad and that you hurt for a friend, that's the gospel. I mean, that's huge. And we can get better at that. All of us can, men and women both.
Yeah, Dr. Kathy, I appreciate that. I wanted to kind of draw out one thing, though, in what you said as we kind of close here. And you talked a little bit about how technology can kind of highlight or make us understand that the world should revolve around us. And we built muscles around that. But I wanted to ask you, is technology really the problem? I mean, I've often kind of understood that it's really the medium to the problem. The problem exists whether there's technology or not, right? And in some ways, I think we look at these behaviors, especially tech, as if that's really the problem. If we just cut tech out, if these kids didn't have a cell phone, then they wouldn't have self-harm issues, right? But I know that when we look back at the generations before us, we would, kind of ascribe that that's not necessarily true. How do we broach the deeper subject then, if I'm right? Like if tech isn't really the issue, there's other things here. How do we broach that deeper subject? How do we address it without letting the conversation shift to really like, oh, you just need to give up your cell phone for 2 weeks, or you just need to change this or that? I think that the crux of the issue is like a character thing, right? Or is technology really the thing that, man, if we just cut tech out of our lives, the world would be a better place? What do you think there?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think if we decreased a lot of our tech use, the world would be a better place. However, for children, they would have to learn skills they've never learned. Adults would have to be reminded of skills they used to use. So if you and I were to get off of our phones more, have a digital Sabbath here and there, we would be reminded of ways that we entertained ourselves or ways that we interacted with friends off of the phone, if you will. Kids who have only related to people through the digital device, kids who have played games mostly on devices, you take those away and they're just going to twiddle their thumbs. Like they're going to be fearful, not able to really cope. And that's true because they're addicted to the adrenaline drop and they're addicted to the lies that they believe, like I am the center of my own universe. So I do think that phones have activated the sin within. And this is what Summit students tell me, that when I talk about, what the behavior that is caused by believing lies like I deserve to be happy all the time, or I must have choice, because technology has taught us choices are right. We who are older know that choice is a privilege, but young people, especially who have been on devices their whole life, their brain is wired to expect choice. And this is why they don't want chicken, they want steak, and they don't want that movie, they want the other movie. They don't want to write a paper with 500 words, they want to write a paper with 350 words. And they actually ask teachers if they can have a change of the assignment. That's how bold they are, because they think that they have a right to the way that they want things to work. And so we have to understand that I think tech has given rise to the sin within. Just like we know that there are certain foods and behaviors that give rise, like you don't even know you're an alcoholic until you start to drink. And then lo and behold, you've got this genetic predisposition to alcoholism. If that makes sense, it's somewhat similar, that tech brings out of us the sin nature that's there. So you take it away and you're going to have to give kids a substitute, and you're going to have to teach them the skills they need to be other-centered and respecting of others and kind to themselves and to others. So I think it's a little bit of everything, if that makes sense.
As Dr. Kathy was talking today, I was reminded of a passage that comes out of Matthew chapter 12, and I'll begin reading at verse 43. When an evil spirit comes out of a person, it goes through arid places, seeking rest, and does not find it. Then it says, I will return to the house that I left. And when it arrives, it finds the house unoccupied, swept clean and put in order. And then it goes and takes with it 7 other spirits more wicked than itself. And they go in and live there. And the final condition of that person is worse than the first. That is how it will be for this wicked generation. This passage comes at an interesting time in Jesus' teaching to just really the world, but specifically to a group of Pharisees, some teachers of the law that were following him around, really wanting a sign. And Jesus talks about how there's a dynamic when we often think of getting rid of maybe bad habits or evil spirits or different things that might be kind of hindering us in our development and growth, not only in identity, but also in understanding of who God is. That if we don't fill those places that we cast out, those bad habits maybe that we have developed, and we're going to now develop new habits, that if we don't fill those with good things, if we don't have a perspective of what we should do kind of in place of that, we could be like this man who cleans up his house, who gets rid of the evil spirit, and everything looks orderly in his mind and the way he's living his life. But unless he fills it with the Spirit of God, Jesus kind of insinuates that there is a danger there, that if we don't fill those empty places with good things, with things of the Lord, that we're in danger of doing things that were even more heinous or wrong or challenging before. So I want to give that mental picture to us a little bit to help us work through some realities that Dr. Kathy encouraged us with today. If we're going to take something out for our kids in their lives, things that they need to, change or habits they need to get rid of, we need to do it with implementing and introducing them to new habits, to new good things, to better, beautiful things, and fill those places that we want to really clean up. I think doing that with our kids builds a security and a confidence and a trust that we're there to help them grow. But I think it also gives them courage that they can really face dark times and fill the darkness really with light. I think that could be a really big encouragement and a shining bright light that will cut through some of the darkness of what it looks like to be a kid growing up in these days. I want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast, this daily segment, Face in the Dark. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, my name is Wayne Stender. We're so glad you joined us this week, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again on Monday.